I'm ND Chan, and today I'm the face of America. I'm ND Chan, and I am the author of Saved as Draft, a memoir. It showcases letters and notes and a little bit of poems that I had written when I was younger to describe my upbringing as an Asian American girl growing up in Long Island, New York. For my whole childhood, I was really trying to figure out what it means to be Chinese American. And I grappled with the notion that in order to be American, I needed to forget about my Chinese portion of myself. I wanted to look like the other kids, so I would try speaking like them and dressing like them. And there were all these different things that I would try to actually just be one of them, to blend in. But it never really seemed to work, obviously, because I look very different than a lot of other children in my school. So it ended up being the case that as I got older, I was trying to get back in touch with my Chinese side, to try to learn a little bit more Mandarin, to try to befriend others who are also of similar backgrounds, and not to be feeling a sense of shame anymore. It's definitely been a learning experience, and I'm still trying to learn how to balance between the Chinese and the American side. So the hyphenation is something that a lot of people who I've spoken with also grapple with. A lot of racial matters have been traditionally black and white. So a lot of people wanted to make sure that the very obvious racial discriminations were addressed first. And I thought that that was also a very good stepping stone or first step in solving the problems. But I did find that a lot of the racial discrimination against Asian Americans were a little bit more subtle, and they were a little bit more in terms of mainstream media. So people probably didn't feel like it was a big deal to have addressed them in the same way that the blatant discrimination against Blacks and Hispanics in the country have traditionally been. So I do feel like it's something where people were always saying, oh, you know, it doesn't actually work against you. Sometimes it can work in your favor. You can get that extra job interview that others wouldn't have gotten, or you can actually do a little bit better on your math test, maybe because the teacher just thinks that you are naturally gifted in that subject. So I think that it's one of the issues that where we try to suppress our thoughts of what discrimination is. We try to pass it off as a positive almost, to justify the differences that are felt by Asian Americans and the community at large when there are little comments being made on the street, or there are little biases with teachers, or even during a full-time job where they expect you to go above and beyond simply because you look to be Asian. And they always say Asians are hard workers and they'll put in the extra hours. So it's been very interesting, the dynamic. I feel like for a very long time, the perception of what politicians should be is very much centered around American and American ideals. And that includes looking American and being able to appeal to the general public. And unfortunately for the Asian American community, it may not be very appealing to the public to stand in front of a large crowd or on national television and tell them to change certain things about the country when they feel as though they don't have a say in many aspects. So I think that there is definitely a lot of work to be done in terms of allowing politicians to step up and allowing the Asian community to also have a say because of the growing population of Asian Americans in this country. And it is one of those things that needs to be addressed, and I think that if they allow them a safer space to speak and not bring forth a lot of judgment while they're on stage, it could greatly help them. when I first started writing, I was very young, but I always thought of it as a hobby. I thought of it as, this isn't something I can do to make a living. This isn't something I can do at a larger scale because there isn't that much space for it. Not for someone like me, not for someone whose background is just so vastly different from the rest of our society. And little did I know, as I got older, I did see that there were a lot of commonalities between myself and other Asian Americans that I had been meeting along the way. So I felt as though that voice that I had, that small voice, kept growing, and it kept getting louder and louder, and eventually it started screaming at me and saying, you have to write this, you have to tell people what you have been through. And I wrote through a lot of the different topics that had nothing to do with being Asian. Most of it has nothing to do with being Asian, but I felt as though being Asian was always a setback for me, that I couldn't sell any books, that I couldn't really relate to most of America because of the way I look. The book is about loss, it's about grief, and not knowing a parent who gave birth to you, one of the two parents, and being always feeling on the outside, always wondering why you are the way you are and not being able to explain it. It's about being a queer woman, and of course being Asian American, but also growing up in an American household.